Hey everyone, my name is Michael Hindi. I'm going to start my video here so everyone can see who I am. But it looks like my timer was actually a little bit off with that one. But like I said, my name is Mike Hindi, and I am the Three Shores SISMA coordinator here, working to stop the spread of invasive species throughout the Eastern Upper Peninsula. And today I wanted to give you guys a little bit of a webinar on Michigan watch list species, so invasive species that are on the watch list and what it means to be on the Michigan watch list. This webinar is provided through grant funds that were achieved through the Michigan Invasive Species Grant Program, and it may be recorded, it will be recorded for future viewing. And so I want to start off with what is a watch list species? And so you might have actually heard of some watch list species without knowing it, but a watch list species is an invasive species. And that means that to be an invasive species, you cannot be native to Michigan, and you must pose some sort of threat to the economy, environment, or to the health of us as humans. And to take it a step further and actually be a watch list species, you have to have a limited or no known distribution throughout the state of Michigan. So these are species that are not very widespread. And you also have to have a significant threat recognized. And so one of these species that you might, like I mentioned, you might know about without even realizing you know about it might be Asian carp. We've all heard the stories of Asian carp down south of us in the Mississippi and moving north with these boats that come through, and these Asian carp jump onto these boats, creating havoc for boaters going through. And so we know that there's a significant threat. It's been recognized as a watch list species here in Michigan, and we are working towards any early detection to prevent any widespread infestation of these species. In Michigan, these watch list species could include a wide variety of different insects. They also include mammals, terrestrial and aquatic plants, as well as aquatic animals as well. There are 30 total species on the Michigan watch list. And again, these are species that we know to pose an immediate and large threat to either the economy, environment, or to our health as humans. And so today I would love to chat about all 30 of those species that we have, but I want to try to keep this talk short and sweet for you guys to really take home message about these three species in particular. The first species I'll chat with you guys today about is the hemlock woolly adelgid, and how to identify it and what to do if you spot it here in the UP. Also the European frogbit and Himalayan balsam. And we're dealing with an invasive insect, an aquatic invasive plant, and a terrestrial invasive plant in the talk here today. And so if you spot any of these species, or you have suspicions that you spot any of these species, one thing that you could do to make an immediate impact with this early detection so that we don't have a widespread infestation of these species is to report the sighting to MISSN. MISSN is a website and app that was developed by Michigan State University, and it works with the Michigan Natural Features Inventory. And you can visit their website here at www.misson.msu.edu, or download the app off the Google Play Store or the App Store on Apple. Along with this, if you have any suspicions of a sighting of any of these species, you can always report them to the Three Shores SISMA here through emailing us at threeshoresisma@gmail.com, or giving me a call anytime at 906-630-7139. And so, like I mentioned, the first species I want to talk to you guys today about is the hemlock woolly adelgid. The hemlock woolly adelgid is a tiny insect that is very hard to spot with the naked eye. And you'll see a picture here in a little bit of what these insects are, but they're microscopic and very nearly impossible to spot. This insect goes and it attaches itself to the base of a needle of a hemlock tree, and it sucks the sap out of the tree until it nearly kills the tree. To protect itself during the harsh elements of anywhere that it causes an infestation, such as winter, it produces these white ovisacs that have a woolly appearance to them. And so these woolly ovisacs that it produces help protect the insect, and there's kind of the way that we best spot these insects. These woolly ovisacs, I like to call them woolly Q-tips. So if you think of the end of a Q-tip, imagine that was made out of wool, and that is a lot like what these ovisacs look like. You can see here in the picture that my mouse is going over, if you guys can see my mouse. They look a lot about the same size as a Q-tip actually. So just put it in your mind, if you see something that looks like a woolly Q-tip on a hemlock tree, there is a possibility that it is a hemlock woolly adelgid. There are other lookalikes out there, such as spider eggs, that could look similar to this. So really try to identify that, is it at the base of where the needle is attaching to the tree? And do I think it looks like a woolly Q-tip, not necessarily in a wispy form. These woolly Q-tips, or the hemlock woolly adelgids, tend to be most visible in November through April when we're starting to get snow on the ground, and these ovisacs are protecting the adelgids from the elements. And so what you can do to prevent the spread of this species into the Upper Peninsula is don't move firewood that came from outside the Upper Peninsula up here. There is a possibility that you accidentally move firewood that has been infested with this tiny insect, and so we don't want to bring it up that way accidentally. Also, if you do have any suspicions of a sighting, you can always report those sightings to us immediately. We do have a team right now that is working to survey the Eastern Upper Peninsula and make sure that we don't have any infestations that we don't know about. And also, another major piece that you can do is take what you learned from our webinar today and raise awareness of it and spread it to your friends or your neighbors so they learn about the species and they can get another set of eyes out there looking for them. Now, like I mentioned, the adelgid insect is actually a microscopic, very tiny insect to spot with the naked eye. If you see in this picture here, we have a penny on the left-hand side. And on the right, you probably see what look like black dots. And those black dots are actually the adelgid crawlers. And so those are the insects. They are small enough that if you were to look at the penny, or you have a penny that you can hold in your hand, they would fit inside the circular part inside the B of the word Liberty. So these are very tiny, nearly impossible to see with the naked eye. And so when these actually do end up in an ecosystem, we can see widespread devastation. When this species showed up in the Smoky National Park, Great Smokies National Park, they were not able to get a hand on the infestation fast enough, and we could see the devastation that the species caused. All these dead trees here that you see are dead hemlock trees, and you can see what's really growing left on these mountainsides is really just deciduous trees. So we've really had a change to this ecosystem, and there are no longer hemlocks growing here at this site. And so that is our first species, the hemlock woolly adelgid. The second species I wanted to chat about real quick was the European frogbit. The European frogbit is a small free-floating plant that looks very similar to a lily pad, but it is much smaller inside. So I like to call these mini lily pads. So if you see a plant where the leaves are looking very similar to a lily pad, but you're thinking, wow, that's very small, chances are it could be European frogbit. This plant, the European frogbit, grows on the backside of these lily pads has a reddish to purple color on it, and it grows a singular white flower that has 3 petals on it. Now, this species can spread very fast because it is able to do sexual and asexual reproduction. So sexually, it produces seeds through fruits, as you would imagine, with other plants out there as well. And it can also do asexual reproduction, meaning that it does not need another plant to reproduce. It actually reproduces asexually through the production of what we call turions. And these turions, as you can see in the picture down on the bottom here, look like little buds that come off of the stem of the plant. Now, where this plant grows, it can quickly form mats that severely limit both recreational activity and habitat. So on the recreational front, when this plant grows and it grows those massive mats in the waterways, it's very hard to drive a boat through there without getting it clogged up with this species, making it nearly impenetrable. And also it's very hard to kayak through there. It's even hard to walk through there with waders. So wherever this species grows, there really limits the recreational activity. And on a fisheries side with the habitat, once the species grows, the fish that were probably living in that habitat that it was growing were growing with some of that sunlight and the changes in oxygen that comes with the sunlight coming into the habitat. Once the European frogbit comes in there, it soaks up all that sunlight that would be seeping through. And now the fish that were reliant on that sunlight and the certain oxygen levels, that has changed. And now the fish that were living there no longer can live there. And the fish that probably could live with those changed habitats aren't there because they weren't there originally. And so what you can do to prevent the spread of this species is to get in the habit of cleaning your boat or kayak after moving out of the water. And this is just a general good practice to have with aquatic invasive species, is to just hose down your boat or kayak and look for any weeds that you might have had attached to your plant to make sure that you're not spreading them to the next water that you take your boat or kayak to. If you do spot this species, it can be manually removed from the water until turions are produced. And turions are these little asexual buds that we talked about, and they typically start to show up in August or September. So if you're manually removing this plant and you see these little buds that show in the bottom right-hand corner, then it's probably best to not be pulling this plant to prevent the spread of those turion into the seedbed. For the species, there are some infestations known in the Eastern U.P. And so we ask that you report any sightings of this species immediately to Three Shores SSMA to kind of nip any new infestations in the bud before they become widespread. And along with this, same with the hemlock woolly adelgid, take what you learned from today and spread it to your neighbors and your friends so that they can get another set of eyes out there looking for this species. Because with any of the species that are on the Michigan watch list, again, detection is key. And we want to find these as soon as they appear so that we don't have a widespread infestation from occurring. And so just to give you an idea of the size of the European frogbit, we see a lake or a pond here with a lot of lily pads. And what look like these tiny lily pads are actually European frogbits. So you can see they're probably about 1/100th of the size of the lily pads, and they grow quite a bit smaller. The other major difference between these lily pads too is this is a free floating plant, which has the lily pad is actually rooted into the bottom of the pond. And the lily pad is growing a flower that has multiple petals on it, whereas the petals on the flower of the European frogbit, there's only 3 of them. And so when you look at this picture, you might actually think, oh, the lily pad's the invasive species. But that's not necessarily the case. When European frogbit grows, it doesn't take long before it grows into a very thick mat like we see here. And if we can't nip this species in the butt right away, we actually get what looks like a completely changed ecosystem here. So this pond likely didn't have European frogbit not too long ago, wasn't recognized very quickly, and now we have what looks like completely European frogbit, changing that habitat for the fish that we talked about and really limiting the recreational activity. It's impossible to go through here with a boat. It's very hard to go through here with a kayak. So the value of this pond has changed quite a bit. And so the last species I want to talk to you guys today about is the Himalayan balsam. So like I mentioned, I want to keep this short and sweet, but the Himalayan balsam is what I like to call the purple policeman helmet flower, because, and I'll show you a little bit better in the next picture that I have up here on the next slide. But this plant produces purple pink flowers with leaves that are heavily serrated and a hollow stem. Now, this plant can reproduce rapidly because it has what are known as ballistic seeds, or if you were to touch this plant, its survival mechanism is to just release all of its seeds immediately into the seed bank. And so that's how this species spreads very rapidly, very fast, because it has these seeds that can rapidly disperse, and they disperse kind of at the first sign of danger. Now, on the other hand, this species also causes a significant problem because we already have a shortage of pollinators in the world, and this species goes out there and alters their behavior in a negative aspect that makes it even worse for the pollinators out there. This species can also alter the water flow and create erosion problems away from where this is growing. And so if you see this species, it can be manually removed, but with the manual removal, you don't want to touch the seed capsules because you don't want to accidentally spread all those seeds into the seed bank. And so manual removal of the species is actually not that hard. It has very shallow roots and it's easily pulled. Again, you just want to avoid touching those seed capsules. It's even best to clip them off before you plan on pulling it out. And so with this species, there are a few known infestations in the Eastern U.P, but any other infestations, it's always good to report them immediately, similar with the other species. And again, take what you know and tell your friends about it. And so where I get this purple policeman's helmet name is if you take this and you turned it on its side, you can picture one of those old-timey policeman's helmets with a little bit of a brim and then that purple hat, or in this case, yeah, purple hat that comes straight up. And you can get a better look at what these seed capsules look like, where you don't want to touch them because you don't want to spread that rapid seed dispersal. And so one other way I like to think of this species is it could be the next terrestrial Phragmites. So with aquatic Phragmites, we know that it can grow in a very dense formation in which nothing else can grow around it. That is the case with this species only on a terrestrial version. It can grow very rapidly, very dense, very tall, as we see with this reference here with this car. And so we don't want this to become the next terrestrial widespread invasive species problem. And again, we can kind of see here on the right with one of our past technicians, it is very easily pulled from the ground because it has very shallow roots. You can barely see the roots here because of how shallow they are, but it also gives you a reference to how tall this species can grow. It easily grows over your head. And so just a quick recap on the three species that we have. The hemlock woolly adelgin, best way to identify it is by looking for those woolly Q-tips on the end of the, where the base of the needles connect to the hemlock trees. For the European frogbit, look for mini lily pads, or lily pads that are about the 100th of the size of an actual lily pad. And for Himalayan balsam, look for that purple policeman's helmet. And so if you have any questions about today's webinar, again, we're trying to keep it as brief as possible. Please feel free to email them to me at 3shorescisma@gmail.com. Now, before I exit for you guys today, I did want to give a little bit of an overview. We have actually invited a guest speaker for our next webinar, which will take place on April 7th. Our guest speaker is Robert Hack. He is a retired research entomologist from the U.S. Forest Service, and he is going to talk to us about exotic forest pests or invasive insects that we find here throughout the Upper Peninsula. The time has not been decided yet, but as soon as we have worked out a time with Robert, I will let you guys know through both Facebook and our website, and so details will be released in the future. We're hoping to offer pesticide credits for his talk, but that is still to be decided as well. And so again, if you have any questions, please feel free to email me at 3shorescisma@gmail.com. So thank you all for tuning in, and I hope you all have a great rest of your evening. All right, have a great one, everyone.